What's up, YouTube? We finally made it past the August 1st deadline for the user-activated hard fork, which is Bitcoin Cash, and the user-activated soft fork, which is Bitcoin SegWit. And from now, we're going to go in two separate paths where I think they'll be complementary to each other or supplementary to each other rather than directly opposing. Because ultimately, they serve different markets, from my opinion, and I'll go through that with you later in the video. So to start off, we're going to take a look at Bitcoin Cash, which is the user-activated hard fork that increased the block size to 8 megabytes. And what this does is try to stay true to the Satoshi white paper, which keeps it a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. What that means is that you can do transactions without a counterparty and send payments directly to one another without anyone interfering. What we'll look at next is the Bitcoin Core team and how they decided to go after scaling. And in this case, they decided to cut the blocks, separate the witness data or signatures from the block, and offload them off-chain. But before we get started, how about we take a step back into time? I did a little research and I found the post by Satoshi Nakamoto where they first implemented the 1 megabyte hard limit. Originally, it was a 32 megabyte hard limit and lowered down to a 1 megabyte hard limit at this particular point in the GitHub repository. It was hidden in several different other commits, right here, the max block size, but wasn't made known until this particular post. And in this post, it was very interesting because there was a really good conversation where they knew that the hard fork was going to happen when they needed to change this particular value. And the value itself was put in to protect the network from DDoS attacks. What really caught my eye looking at this conversation was the interaction between Bitcoin INV and Arctic Mind, who asked, why did Satoshi ever stop posting? And from then, it was a theory, and I kind of agree with this theory, that Satoshi left Bitcoin so that the Bitcoin experiment could self-govern itself without him as a central authority. So they wouldn't have to look for him for guidance and instead would have to work it out with each other, which caused the soft fork or the hard fork and see how people would figure out how to get around it. Because the block limit is one way to scale, and what we found is with Bitcoin Core is that they wanted to do a separate way to scale which adds different layers. So this was a real interesting social experiment because they saw it coming 4 years ago, 7 years ago. It was pretty much a time bomb waiting to happen. And as you can see, this one particular sentence says it all. The block size issue is likely to be the perfect test since the community has no choice but to implement a hard fork. And in this sentence alone, it describes everything that we've gone through over the last few months and years. And we finally come to a resolution. And with this, we actually have two separate paths. And this is what I believe it looks like for the two separate types of scaling options. I should actually correct that and say 3 options because we're going to have another 2 megabyte version or SegWit 2X come along in November 15th. But we'll actually see if that happens or not. I'm not so sure it's going to happen unless SegWit feels threatened by the Bitcoin Cash. But we'll see about that. I don't know if that's the case, or perhaps they will just bump up the block size. But what you can see here in blue is the main blocks. And I tried to represent them with small blocks, medium blocks, and then a big block, or what's called a new lexicon called a power block. And that features secure signatures. That's all on-chain scaling. What we see with segregated witness is that it separates the block and splits off the witness data or signatures into a separate channel onto where it can ride on a separate sidechain. There's a common misconception that sidechains require SegWit, and that's not entirely true. It really is an optional feature for things like Lightning Network and for RSK or Rootstock, which enables smart contracts. So Lightning Network is a payment channel and Rootstock is a smart contract that bridges on to the main blockchain. But when you use these features, you incur additional fees that are on the side chain. Same for, it's like paying for an express lane, because if the block is smaller and that gets full and it's congested, basically then you can use the side chain to bypass that. When you use this type of workflow, basically the payment will go first and then will eventually settle in once the blocks catch up. So it's kind of a, this is why they call it a settlement layer. So basically payment goes first and then settles later. Or in the case of Lightning Network, you can do multiple microtransactions on the side chain and then send the aggregate back to the main block on the main Bitcoin chain. Whereas on the power blocks and the secure SIGs, it's all done inside the main blockchain on chain, and only uses the sidechain for contracts that can pull data on and off as needed. To give you a better idea about what Lightning Network is, I'll link below to this explainer video of the Lightning Network. It's pretty good, but it's kind of complicated, but it's the best that's out there right now. And this is an example of how Bitcoin Cash can use Lightning Network today, which is basically a unidirectional channel. What SegWit allows for is a bidirectional channel, which brings in what many believe are called BINCs, or basically Bitcoin banks, where the separate channels or the sidechain will house and aggregate all the microtransactions kept on centralized servers off-chain and then send the aggregate back. What this allows for is for more confidential transactions if you don't want them to be seen on the main chain. What this also does is add an intermediary that handles all the microtransactions. And this is what allows businesses to use Bitcoin. So that's why I said there's a difference, because one I see as commercial and the other I see as retail. And they'll both work in this particular economy. So before I wanted to go, I'll just show you that RSK and Rootstock can work without SegWit. I should have said Lightning Network, but I said Rootstock twice, which is RSK. And here's also Blockstream's Liquid, which they've beta tested only recently. This was from May 31st? Yes. And what this does is use the sidechain, and you can see the fee on the side, and it's an example of what they've been working on to use segregated witness. So all in all, they both serve different purposes. I do think that they are complementary. They're not really going directly against each other. It's more like frenemies. I did a poll one day on what people thought Bitcoin was. Is Bitcoin an asset or a currency? And a lot of people said asset, a lot of people said currency, a lot of people said both. So that really ends up being, you know, the 1 megabyte can be digital gold. The 8 megabyte is more of a transaction layer for retail and person-to-person transaction for eCash. And then 2x is really the best of both worlds. Where we end up is going to be seen by everyone when the market decides what works best for the marketplace. That's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can see that now that we finally split, they're actually going to go down two separate paths, and hopefully everything, the entire market gets lifted rather than one going up, one going down, because ultimately this is just the beginning. And you know, it's not really us versus them kind of thing. It's all of us versus the banking, the Fed, fiat. We're all in this together, going after the same goal, which is financial freedom and trying to keep our money safe. So if you like this video, please hit that like button or leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.